On February 2nd, 1979, Sex Pistols star Sid Vicious was found dead, but this was no simple rock and roll tragedy. The truth, found on a note in his pocket, was that he died to fulfill a death pact with his murdered girlfriend, Nancy Spungen, who many accused Sid of killing. But the real secret, one that involves his own mother, Anne Beverley, and a cast of shadowy characters, is that he may not have been the one to strike the fatal blow on himself or on Nancy. To understand the end, you must go back to the beginning, with a boy named John Simon Ritchie. He wasn't a musician, he was a look, a blank canvas for a new nihilistic kind of fame. He was discovered by the grand puppet master of punk, Malcolm McLaren, the manager of the Sex Pistols. McLaren saw a walking, sneering headline, not a bassist. He famously said that if Sid couldn't play, he was perfect. McLaren's first move was to rename him Sid Vicious, after a hamster. The irony was lost as Sid quickly grew into the name. He was taught a few bass notes by his bandmates, but was often unplugged during live shows, his amp turned off. His real job was to be the chaotic, violent, and photogenic center of the punk rock explosion. The press ate it up, and Sid, a boy from a broken home, finally found the attention he craved by playing the monster. But every monster needs a partner, and in 1977, he found his. Nancy Spungen was a teenage American groupie who had trailed bands to London, but she was universally despised by the punk scene. They called her Nauseating Nancy for her grating personality and her open, abrasive addiction to heroin. But in Sid, the ultimate outcast, she found an equal, and in her, Sid found the one person who truly understood him. Their relationship was a two-person hurricane, a vortex of codependency and shared needles. It was the ultimate us-against-the-world romance, and it isolated them from everyone. The Sex Pistols, already fragmenting, blamed Nancy for their final implosion during a disastrous American tour. When the band split, Sid and Nancy were set adrift, bound only to each other and their shared addiction. They washed up in New York City, taking up residence in room 100 of the legendary Hotel Chelsea. This wasn't the Chelsea of Andy Warhol's superstars anymore. It was a crumbling, squalid shadow of its former self. Their room was a junkie's den, a place of constant traffic, petty theft, and desperation. They were living off Sid's meager royalty checks, spending every cent on drugs, and spiraling toward an inevitable end. On the morning of October 12th, 1978, the front desk got an incoherent call. Hotel staff found Nancy Spungen on the bathroom floor, dead. She had bled to death from a single, deep stab wound to her abdomen. The knife, a distinctive 007 hunting knife Sid had recently purchased, was on the scene. And Sid Vicious, her supposed lover, was wandering the halls in a drug-induced stupor. Sid was immediately arrested, the perfect scapegoat in his leather jacket. He allegedly gave a full confession, reportedly telling police, "I did it because I'm a dirty dog." The papers printed it, and the world condemned him. But there was one massive, overlooked flaw in the case. Sid had taken at least 30 tablets of Tuinal, a powerful barbiturate, that night. He was, by all accounts, so comatose he couldn't even stand, let alone orchestrate a violent argument and a fatal stabbing. So if Sid didn't do it, who did? The room that night was a revolving door of dealers and hangers-on. A large sum of cash Sid had just received for a gig had mysteriously vanished by the time police arrived. Suspicion has long fallen on a man named Rockets Redglare, a part-time actor, bodyguard, and drug dealer who was reportedly there to sell them drugs. Did Nancy, known for being confrontational, get into a fight with a dealer over the money? Here is the most shocking truth of the entire case. The New York Police Department did dust for prints in room 100. And according to their own files, they found fingerprints belonging to 6 different people other than Sid or Nancy. Not a single one of those prints was ever followed up. The case was simple. the punk rock monster, confessed, so they closed the book, leaving a half-dozen leads to go cold. Despite the mountain of doubt, Sid was charged with second-degree murder. His record label, Virgin Records, saw a twisted marketing opportunity and paid his $50,000 bail. Sid was released, but he was a ghost. He was a 21-year-old boy, completely broken, now convinced that he must have murdered the only person he ever loved, even if he couldn't remember it. This story is just getting darker. If you're fascinated by these rock and roll mysteries, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next investigation. His freedom was a chaotic mess. He immediately latched onto a new girlfriend, Michelle Robinson, and tried to continue a career that was only ever a gimmick. But he was a walking target. Just 55 days after his release, he got into a bar fight at a club. The man he fought? Todd Smith, the brother of fellow punk icon, Patti Smith. Sid was arrested again, this time for assault, and sent to Rikers Island for a brutal, forced detox. On February 1st, 1979, Sid Vicious was released on bail for a second time. He had been clean for almost 2 months inside Rikers. To celebrate his release, a small party was thrown at his girlfriend's apartment in Greenwich Village. And who was the party's host? The one who cooked Sid a welcome home meal of spaghetti bolognese? His own mother, Anne Beverley. The guests at that party included several friends and fellow musicians, including Jerry Only of the horror punk band The Misfits. But the real guest of honor was the heroine. Anne Beverley, a registered addict herself, had gone out and scored the drugs for her son's celebration. The heroin she procured was notoriously, dangerously pure. Rumored to be 98% pure, a hot shot so strong it was more poison than drug. During the party, Sid shot up and immediately overdosed. He turned blue, his breathing stopped, but his friends managed to revive him, walking him around and throwing cold water on him. He seemingly recovered and everyone was relieved. Later that night, his mother and his girlfriend put him to bed, allegedly clear-headed. The next morning, February 2nd, Anne Beverley found her 21-year-old son cold and dead. The world read it as a tragic accidental overdose by a hopeless junkie. But the truth is far darker. That fatal dose, it was not a relapse. Sid had asked his mother for the heroin, and she had given it to him. She knew he was clean from Rikers. She knew his tolerance was gone. And she, an experienced addict, knew exactly what a dose of that purity would do to her son. This is where the story shifts from tragedy to a potential mercy killing. Years later, journalist Alan Parker and friends of Anne's claimed she gave a deathbed confession. She allegedly admitted to intentionally administering the fatal dose of heroin after Sid had been put to bed. Why? She was terrified of him going back to prison, this time for life, for a murder he couldn't even remember. She decided to reunite him with the girl he couldn't live without. And what was her justification? The suicide pact note. She was the one who claimed to have found the note in Sid's pocket after his death. The note read, "We had a death pact. I have to keep my side of the bargain. Please bury me next to my baby." Was this note real, or was it a convenient romantic excuse for a mother's unspeakable act? It framed Sid's death not as an accidental overdose and not as a murder, but as a final, tragic act of love. Anne Beverley held on to that note as her gospel. She had her son's body cremated and flew to Pennsylvania, where Nancy was buried in a Jewish cemetery. Sid, not being Jewish, was forbidden from being interred there. So Anne, under the cover of night, broke into the cemetery. She fulfilled the pact herself, scattering her son's ashes over Nancy's grave, ensuring they were together in death against the wishes of Nancy's horrified family. So who was Sid Vicious? He was a 21-year-old kid named John who couldn't play the bass. He was a product, a scapegoat, and a victim. He was framed by the press as a monster, and perhaps by a dealer for a murder he didn't commit. In the end, his greatest hit was his own death. The scandal, the mystery, and the love story crafted by his own mother, became the legend, a legend far more powerful and profitable than the man himself. Enjoying our deep dives into rock and roll's history? Please drop us a like and a subscribe to support the channel, and feel free to click one of the videos on your screen to continue learning about classic rock's dark past. See you there.